Alright, so I added another cross member here with all this bolted together, and I'm going to take this one back out. This is the one that comes with the kit, because when I slide my frame rails in there, they're going to hit where these bolts are at. And so what I'm thinking is I'll slide my frame rails in, get them situated, a couple of bolts. I'll mark these bolt holes, drill through my new frame rail, and I'll either tap those holes for these bolts for the 7/16, or if need be, I'll weld a nut to the inside for those to go into. Again, because these cover plates were welded on, we're kind of fighting stuff. This should be really easy. If you stuck the rectangular tubing in there or a piece of channel in there from the other frame rail, without these covers on there, you'd be able to reach in, you'd cut it off at the right angle, and then you'd be able to reach inside and put a nut or a bolt or whatever on it. But unless we're going to go through and cut all that weld off, and honestly, by the time we did it, something would have to probably go away, which would be these covers. So then we'd have to call Porterbuilt and get some new ones. And they've been pretty cool. I've called them a couple times now, and they're helping me with some brackets that were on the rear axle. And I know I could get these from them, but it's just a matter of you're cutting stuff off that right now they're not hurting anything. It's just not as easy as it would be without them on there, which is, again, why they're supposed to be bolted on, not welded on. Of course, the guy that thought he was, that put this all together, thought it was basically done. And it would have been if these uprights had been in the right location. We wouldn't be chasing 90% of this. We would have repaired these frame rails, gotten them straightened up and square, and if the frame had been the way it was supposed to be, we just wouldn't be chasing all this stuff. So anyway, I need to cut this piece of steel loose, and the lower flat bar is stuck on this side, the square tube I stuck on the other side. I think that's all that needs. These uprights need to stay so that when we slide the new piece of tube in, we have something to clamp to and we can tack weld it to get everything lined up, and then we'll put our rear cross member. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll take this piece of square tube, bolt it, set it on top of our frame rail, and we'll get an end-to-end length that is exactly the right size for this truck. So. I'm wanting to measure all the way into this frame rail until I'm hitting that back side of that upright. And with these tape measures, they have, and a lot of tape measures have this, has that extra little tang on it, and that is hitting that upright. You know, it's like this. So one of these pieces is hitting that upright before it's actually tied up against it, and I want to get as close as I can to an accurate measurement. Does this measurement need to be 100%? Is it that critical? No. But if we're going to cut it, may as well try and cut as much as we actually need. That is right at 25 inches. So we're going to cut 25 inches for both of these. Check this one just to be sure. Yep. We cut two pieces 25 inches long. That is the long side going in. We can cut the angle on it after we get two pieces so that we can figure out, we can then lay it up there and get the angle. All right, well, we've got our steel cut and deburred the ends where I've cut it. To get the angle, I just used this very inexpensive angle finder and laid it up under here and measured the angle here, which came out to 133 degrees. So there's 180 in a triangle, so subtract 133 from 180, and you get your saw you get the angle that you need to set your saw at, which 47 degrees. So it's a little more than a lot of saws will do. Obviously, if you get within a degree or two, you're probably going to be close enough, especially since the cut end is bevel or is hidden behind this other plate. My saw will let me cheat it just a little bit if you take a pin out of the way. So that's what I did to get the angle. And then because this tube is 3 inches wide, I can't just slide it into these uprights. So there's two choices. I could either split, it's 2 3/4 inches inside, so I could either split 1/4 of an inch out of the new frame rail so it would slide up in there, or I can do what I did, which is just cut part of the upright away. We do have to replace the holes where this tubular crossmember mounts. So I cut it away, slid my new crossmember or my new frame rail in place, put the piece that I cut off back in place, got it all lined up, clamped it, and then I used a transfer punch, which is just you buy them in a set. And it's just a piece of hardened steel, or I hope it's hardened, and it has a little tit on the end of the punch there, and you find one that's sized for the hole you're working on. And so that's what I did. I got one that fits the hole real tight, and then it'll put a punch right in the center of the setup for you, and then you can go back in and drill that out. The only thing I failed to do before I did that, so I may have to redo it, is I need to measure from the end of this frame rail to the front of the frame rails and make sure I'm exactly the right length for the frame. Now if I'm a little long, that's no big deal. We can mark a line and cut some of this frame rail off. But if I'm a little short, we need to pull this out just a little bit. And I threw a couple tack welds on here because it's all clamped, but you don't want it moving around very much. So I threw a couple tack welds on it. So we're gonna measure that, and all I do is I take a piece of this square tubing, which is right here, and what I've been doing is just clamping that to the back of this frame rail, or in this case I'll clamp it to the back of the frame rail, and then I pull a tape measure from this one to another piece of tubing mounted to the front or the front frame rails, and that lets me measure my distance. It's easier if you have two frame rails here, because then you can just stick it out one side, but we'll just get it squared up on the frame rail and clamp it in place and then pull our measurement. So to get this to stay square, I couldn't clamp it in place anywhere, so I just threw a couple tack welds on this tubing, and this is 3/4 inch square tubing. That's what I have clamped to the front of the frame, is 3/4 inch square tubing. Pull an outside to outside measurement, and I get 181 1/8. You subtract the 1.5 inches for the two pieces of tubing. Anyway, we are 3/8 of an inch too long at this frame rail, so we're going to need to take 3/8 of an inch out. That's fine. We don't have to slide in or out of the frame here, and so everything there is good. And where I put my center punches for those bolt holes is good. So I'm going to cut those loose, put the other frame rail in here, and I started telling you guys I cut the side of this frame off, these uprights. I was going to have to fill a couple of holes anyway, but the other thing is this frame, or this upright, is 1/8 inch steel, so I was either going to have to cut 1/4 inch out of this rectangular tubing, which is a whole sidewall, it's 1/4 inch sidewall, or I could take this 1/8 inch plate off, and then it had a doubler right here where this mounts, giving it the same thickness. So when I'm all done, this box is the same thickness as where this bolted through anyway, and I have 1/4 inch wall so I can put bolts through it. So to me, it just made more sense to go ahead and cut the side of the upright out and use the 1/4 inch wall tubing as our side there. So we're going to weld all that in, and for now I'm tacking everything with a MIG, but I fully plan to go through and TIG weld everything we do. So all the frame members and everything, we'll get it all TIG welded together. It's more time consuming, but you get I think you get a good strong weld, and you get, let's face it, typically a prettier weld. If you look at the way this whole setup was done, it was all TIG welded. Anyway, with that plan in place, we can get rid of these clamps. And this is the piece I cut out. So see, I was gonna have to fill this hole, I was gonna have to fill this hole. These are the only two we needed for the cross member. So it's out of the way. Like I said, right now this is tacked in place, but I'm gonna go ahead and leave it alone, get the other side done, mark its cross member points. When I'm sure all that's correct, I'll remeasure this back length, and as long as I haven't moved anything or changed anything, and I'll just mark what I need to cut off, and then I'm going to take it over to the saw station, cut that end off, because I'll just cut these tack welds loose, cut the end off, then I know it's exactly right. And like up here, we've got a bolt hole that would have gone through here, so we'll mark this bolt hole, and then we know how to come right back and put this frame rail in exactly the same spot, because again, I'm going to just drill and tap this 1/4 inch wall to hold these bolts, and then they're all 7/16. So we have a plan, we have a way to bring it all back to exactly the same spot and make everything nice and strong. Now these over here on the side, I'm going to put one bolt in on this outside, and then I'll fillet weld or rosette weld the rest of these holes, because we're going to weld this whole thing anyway, so we don't need any bolts on the outside. But by doing one, it'll give me a way to locate where this frame rail needs to go when it goes back into the frame after I cut the tack welds loose. The other thing I was going to show you guys is, if you don't have an inexpensive scissor lift, you can buy them at Harbor Freight. I bought this one at Amazon. You can get them out of the junkyard. Half the foreign cars in the world. These are great for being able to, like, with this frame rail is heavy, and I'm trying to get it up in there and clamp it and get it put in the right place, and you can just put this under there, do all the modifications you need to do, and then this one happens to have a pretty cool little ratchet wrench to do the jacking part. So if you don't have one of those and you're doing fabrication, get one or two of these. I actually have, I think, 4 of them that have this same handle. So a lot of times when you're trying to get something level, you can put 4 points and level everything out, because you have almost infinite adjustability here for changing the grade on something. All right, so I pulled these out, I trimmed off the ends, and then I was about to start to punch the pattern for these, since I know where this bracket needs to go now. The other thing I did was in here where the tubular cross members got to mount, this has all been tapped, but I went ahead and welded in a couple of nuts to capture that, so there's a good strong point there. And I think I've shown you guys these nuts I like to use for. So if you look at a regular 7/16 nut, this happens to be a nylock, but you get the idea for the size. Yeah, so it uses a regular 7/16 inch nut uses a 5/8 inch wrench, and these use, I think, a 3/4. What they're called a thick wall nut. The thing about them is they don't have any zinc or other coatings on them. They might be black oxide, but there's no coatings on them that are harmful when you weld. So I like to use those. They're thicker. When you weld them, they don't try and distort as easy, and so you get plenty of metal to weld to. So that's what I like to use when I'm welding nuts in. And for now, we're gonna go ahead and get this cross member set once again. So use the sides that they are. We're gonna get this squared up again. So we're going to drill these 4 holes, tap them. I'll probably go ahead and weld a nut in on the back side of each of those, and then this frame rail will be ready to install.